Hey friends, thanks for joining me here on Paint and Draw with Tom. I am Tom Neiman, and today we're going to paint a little winter scene at sunset based upon a scene that I snapped a photo of in our backyard. So we are in a busy season right now where we have a lot of things going on, and we want to make the most of the family time that we have. And as a result of that, we have to look for the small gaps of free time and make the most of those if we want to continue the creative momentum that we've been able to generate recently. So we're going to paint small, just 6 inches by 8 inches on a sheet of prime linen that we're going to tape down to our table. We're going to paint with a unique palette, at least unique for me, which is going to include some different colors, particularly one that I'm interested in, which is transparent orange oxide. It'll be the first time that I'll be using that color. And we're going to paint this fantastic winter scene that I snapped a photo of in our backyard. And we're going to transform it from its portrait format, which is the taller rectangular format that you see here. And we're going to transform that into a landscape format just because I feel like the scene will resonate a little bit better in the landscape format. So we'll talk through how it is that we're going to accomplish that, and we'll have the full video available for you with some commentary along the way. Come along with me, we'll get started. And again, appreciate you joining me here on my channel. If you could just do me a favor and like this video, share it with a friend that you feel like might enjoy it or get something from it. And if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing to the channel. That'll go a long way to help me grow this channel and my art practice in general. So thanks again, and here we go. Okay, there you can see my palette. It's listed out up on screen, and I'll put a list in the notes for this video as well. You can see most of the pigments that I'm using today are produced by Gamlin. There's a few, just two of them. The transparent orange oxide that I mentioned earlier and the titanium white are offered through other brands. It's not that I typically have any sort of brand preference. I'm just experimenting as I learn and grow as a painter with different manufacturers to get a better understanding as to what's available to us as painters. I'm going to be using my little dollar store pizza tray as my palette. You can see it's been used a few times and I cleaned it as best as I could. I have a little bit of linseed oil in that can toward the top left corner of the screen. And I'm going to go ahead and squeeze out just little tiny bits of paint on my palette. This is a small surface. We are going to be painting mostly thin in this effort today, so I don't expect to have to use a ton of paint. I might even be able to start an additional painting later on this week with this existing palette if I'm careful enough. So I'm going to go ahead and squeeze these out. They're in the same order that they were listed before, and once we get the paint out, we will go ahead and get started. Now, I am, as mentioned earlier, going to transform this portrait scene that's in the portrait format to a landscape format. And I'm going to start off doing that by breaking out my surface into thirds. I'm really going to focus in on the rule of thirds in order to transform and edit this scene. The photograph that I took, as you can see, references the sun setting right at the horizon line, almost in the middle of the photo. I want to avoid doing that. There is a tendency for us to put the focal point of our pictures in the center of our scene, and that's a big no-no when it comes to scene design. So I'm going to slide it off to roughly the right-hand third quadrant of our linen sheet here. So we'll mark that out first, and that'll be a key strategy that I'll employ in order to execute this transition from portrait format to landscape format. We'll just use a little bit of transparent orange oxide mixed with a fair amount of linseed oil. It's probably let's say 60-40, 60% pigment and 40% linseed oil. And I'm going to use nothing, for the most part, nothing but round brushes, medium to small size round brushes today. We have a 12, I believe an 8 and a 10 maybe here. I'm due for an eye appointment, so I can't make out that small font. So you might have a better chance of doing that than me. So we're going to use these brushes. You can see they're worse for the wear. They've been used quite a bit. I've gotten into the habit of just keeping my brushes after wiping them off into brush dip, which is a homemade brush dip that I use that consists of a little bit of linseed oil plus a little bit of dish detergent plus a lot of water. And I just keep my brushes dipped in there and clean them, wipe them down after use and before use. That saves me a bunch of time, but they do look a little dirty and dingy. They still work though, and that's food for thought for you. If you're interested in some time-saving tips, I might put a little video on how I do that on the channel here. Now I'm going to go ahead and dip into that transparent orange oxide with quite a bit of oil. Clean off a little bit of dust that's actually on my linen. I'm painting in an unusual way here. This linen sheet is actually taped with painter's tape to a flat surface, laid horizontal to the ground. It's not a way with which I'm typically going to be painting in, but in my small studio, this gives me the opportunity to save space, still be able to work on other things. And also, I think variety oftentimes can be a really helpful tool. It could help us just look at the world a little bit differently and our process a little bit differently when we paint in an unusual format. So I'll go ahead and, as you can see, I applied little marks breaking up the surface area into thirds, both vertically and horizontally. I'm going to try and kind of weave my way through the layout of this painting such that any areas that I want to draw interest to or that could lend to making this painting a little bit more interesting and pleasing to the eye, we'll try to keep them within those areas that demark 1/3 of the surface, whether it be on the vertical or horizontal plane. That'll help us have hopefully a design, a composition, if you will, that's pleasing to the eye, that reads well from a distance, and obviously allows us to put a little bit of thought behind the editing that we're going to be doing based upon the photograph that we're working from. I'm hopeful, being that this is the first time I'm working with transparent orange oxide, I'm hopeful that throughout my painting effort, the initial orange oxide that I lay in, some of it may actually peek through the additional layers of color that I add. I'm thinking that that might lend to some interesting effects, but we'll see. Just having fun here in the studio, and if the end result's good, that's wonderful. If it's not so good, that's fine too. We're still creating, and any day that we're behind the easel or applying paint to a surface or drawing, we're having a good day for the most part. Really hard to knock us off course if we've had time to create. So I'll continue to work my way through and lay in different indications, just guideposts, if you will. Those might be tree trunks as we make our way through the painting here. And then we'll get down to blocking in different areas of color. Now we're just going to put a few marks intended to serve as guideposts for some of the basic cloud shapes that we're going to have in the sky area here. Not trying to do too much, just laying in a slight mixture of that orange oxide and in addition to that some yellow ochre. And we're also going to strengthen that a little bit with some additional yellow ochre. And along the horizon line, or along the treetops, probably more accurately, we're going to lay in a small band of yellow ochre. And the intention here is just to give a little hint towards that natural occurrence where you see the atmospheric effects closer to the horizon. The sky tends to warm a little bit, even during midday, but especially during dusk or sunset time periods. So we're going to lay that in and we're going to use that later. We'll blend that into the sky. We'll also use it to create some indications of some of the highlights on the bottoms of those cloud shapes where the light is going to be reflecting off of them. So now we're going to mix up a little bit of titanium white and ultramarine blue. We're going to use this mixture for both some of the shadow patterns within the snow, both in the foreground and the distant areas within the tree line, but also up in the sky as well. And with this particular color palette, you might see that this pool of light blue might gray out a little bit. That's okay. We're fine with a little bit of gray going up into the sky. If you look closely at the reference photo, you'll notice that the sky, especially toward the top of the scene, has a little bit of a gray tint to it. It's a little desaturated, and that'll help enhance the overall feeling of this scene and create the illusion that the flecks of colored light within the snow, for them to be much more intense, or seem to be much more intense than they otherwise would be. Now we're just going to work our way through with our handy dandy cotton swab or Q-tip. We're going to lighten up some of those passages of transparent yellow ochre and transparent orange oxide. And we're going to do this to allow some of the white canvas or linen show through a little bit more clearly. It'll help create the illusion of bright light coming through. And similarly too, if you notice, the particular area I was just working on, that I'm working on here again, aligns with one of those 1/3 markers, almost right in the area where the vertical and horizontal third marker align on the upper right hand side of our linen sheet here. I'm going to actually put the sun setting over the horizon right in that spot instead of in the middle of the image, as is the case with the reference photo, in an effort just to make this particular scene a little bit more interesting. By centering the sun or any of the focal points in a painting, you tend to create a scene that's a little less interesting, a little less likely to catch the eye of a passerby. When you move it into this 1/3 range, it just seems to make the scene a little bit more interesting, a little bit more likely for the viewer to move their eye around the painting a little bit longer and stay in the scene a little bit longer as well. So now we're going to put in some passages of lighter grays with the intention of indicating some interesting shadow patterns throughout the ground plane, which is snow covered at this point. And then once we get through this, we'll gradually build up to lighter colors, almost pure white in some instances. At the very end of this painting session, which will last just a little bit under an hour, we will put some of the highlights that are tinted orange in the snow as well. And during that same time period, we'll walk through and build out those shadow patterns a little bit further. For now, I'm going to go ahead and build up the sky color a little bit further. It's a little darker than I was hoping for, so I'll add some additional titanium white and we'll work our way through here and we'll end up rubbing some of this out, wiping some of this out. When you're painting in oil paints, it really works wonders if you start with thinner passages. And I'm noticing that I'm putting this on a little bit too thick in the early stages here. That could provide for some challenges with the additional layers that I put on in that sky area. So we'll wipe that down a little bit and we'll just keep making progress through this painting. So at this point, you can see I'm kind of haphazardly working my way through with some vertical and horizontal strokes using my round brush here with a mixture of titanium white and ultramarine blue. In some cases, we've graded out a little bit with some little tints of transparent orange oxide. Now, in the effort to darken that stand of trees, that row of trees in the background, I'm going to add a very thin layer of chromatic black, which is probably 50-50 linseed oil and chromatic black, on top of that wet layer of transparent orange oxide. The result here is a darker, warm gray. And the reason why I'm aiming in that direction, both from a color temperature and hue and value perspective, is because I want to create the illusion of increased intensity where that sun is actually spilling over the tree line and the horizon line. So it should do the trick here. I'm going to leave areas of that little reddish orange tint from the transparent red oxide showing through, because that's going to create some of those warm splashes of light, which are so very nice and balance out the dark heaviness of the gray that we're laying in. I'll also use that same little bit of pigment on the brush to create some dark shadow areas throughout the rest of the painting, but for the most part, we'll concentrate there. And you can see how nice that's already having an effect on the appearance of the sun's rays, being very careful not to totally erase some of those areas that were rubbed out by the Q-tip, because we want to create the illusion of that light bending around those tree shapes in the background. All right, now we're going to use some of that same chromatic black mixed with a little bit of the dioxazine purple, and we're going to build in some of the larger tree trunks. Most of them are pretty vertical. We'll try to create some, kind of naturalness by bending some of them and creating some angular shapes. We're not going to paint every tree here. We're just going to get some of the main larger shapes in, and then we'll just use our brushwork in a little bit down the road to create the illusion of some of the smaller branches and so forth coming out of those trees. We use that same color to kind of dance around in the distant tree lines and some of the shrubbery and in that little evergreen tree off to the bottom right of the scene. And we'll just keep working our way through and around, never really focusing in for too long on one particular area of the painting, trying to get some of that color that's on the brush throughout as much of the painting, at least the parts of the painting that share the same or similar value, in an effort to create a little bit of color harmony and interest and variability throughout. Now, as we put in more and more of these evergreen shapes in the distance, I've mixed in some cases, a little bit of ultramarine blue and a little bit of the dioxazine purple in order to push that back a little further. The cooler temperature of those color mixtures will push that back into the distance. In addition to that, just thinking about the shape, I'm obviously not attempting to paint every branch and every pine needle and pine cone, just thinking about the general silhouetted shapes of those trees. It's one of the advantages of painting trees that are backlit like this and in low light, because you could be really, really generous with yourself and save a lot of time just by painting the bigger shapes. And that's what we'll continue to do from here on out. We'll also take some great care to make sure that we don't erase too many of those little spots of orange, because that kind of tricks the eye into thinking that maybe some of those trees are catching some of the sunlight as it spills over the tree line and the horizon line, much like we see with that cloud in the upper right hand corner there, or near the upper right hand corner just above the sun's rays. It's catching on the bottom edge of that cloud that orange, which is kind of tricking the eye into thinking that it's reflecting some of that sunlight. So we're going to try and make sure that we include some of those little spots peeking through in other areas of the painting as well. It does create a nice warming effect in this cooler late afternoon snow scene. Before we get too far along in the painting, I do want to experiment a little bit with the transparent orange oxide and see what kind of effects we can create, warming up some of the white snowy areas. Um, and also I want to dance around a little bit within the snow and use almost pure titanium white. You don't want to overdo this, but it is a nice way of creating a little bit of a glistening, glowing effect, indicating that maybe some drifts and some footprints, both from our animal friends and humans perhaps, have disturbed the snow and created some textures. And we could build off of that with some of the shadow patterns that we'll lay in as a follow-up to this effort. From here on out, it's just really a matter of modulating those warm tones, indicating the sunset light reflecting off of the snow, those little beams of light, and also the shadows, darkening the shadows occasionally, lighting the edges, blending the edges very gently. And from here on out, it's just really a matter of judgment, determining when we should stop. So we're getting close. We're going to wrap this painting up in about another 10 minutes or so, but we'll just keep working here quietly. Bless you. Bless you. At this point, it's really important to slow down and be thoughtful with each mark that you make. I think right now I'm going to use the magic of the back of the brush just to scratch in some marks and create the illusion of some detail before we reevaluate and potentially wrap up for good. Like using the back of the brush or a palette knife or the back handle of a palette knife to create these little marks. You just can't accomplish them with a brush. So the variability of marks can go a long way to make the painting just a little bit more convincing without All right, I think we're down to the magic moment here where we'll pull the tape off. There'll be a nice little white border that'll present itself on the outer edges of this painting. It'll give us an idea of what this painting will look like when it's framed or matted, and you get a really good sense for how it's going to read once it's hanging up on a wall once you take the tape off here. All right, can be a little tricky tearing up the paper backing that I have laid down on the table. It's looking good so far. Love those clean, crisp edges. The last piece, there we go. Thanks for checking out my video. Hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to use this for reference for your own paint along if you wish to do so. And hope you stay well. Hope to see you again next time.